What's up, YouTube? I want to talk about Israeli foreign policy. And first of all, before we get into this, you got to understand Israel faces a lot of threats around the world. I mean, like, they do deal with a lot of non conventional threats that are very difficult to deal with because you can't necessarily use the military to solve them, and they'll have a lot of people out there that have support. So, I mean, every side in this has a certain advantage in the situation. Like, Hamas has the advantage that they got the home advantage and more people that they can brainwash to do stuff for them. And Hamas can hide among civilians like anybody else, so it's harder to take out Hamas. Now, on the other hand, Israel's got the better army, and they got the better trained troops, and they have the resources that Hamas doesn't have. You know, Hamas gets basically older Cold War weaponry, AK-74, AK-47, RPG, missiles from Russia. They don't get very good stuff. But the Israeli army has much better equipment. But Hamas has the support on a large part of the people in a lot of the places where they are. Especially like Gaza, there's a lot of support for Hamas. So it makes the situation a much more complicated issue because how can you deal with this when you have lots of threats? Well, earlier there was the roadblock, in the wall to prevent people from coming in and launching attacks. If they weren't citizens and they didn't have a passport and they were trying to get in, there was a question there. Is it safe for them to be coming in here? They could be launching attacks. So they built the wall. And, this is where, like, Ariel Sharon was a tough but fair. And he saw there needs to be a constructive relationship. So he started the dawn of, acknowledging the state of Palestine and deoccupied Gaza. But then, when he got incapacitated, then Ariel Sharon was replaced by Netanyahu. And Netanyahu has wanted more military approach. Now, military doesn't always solve terrorism issues because you can end up attacking civilians in the process, and then more people are going to side with the radicals, and they're going to look at you as basically fighting a war for peace, and they're going to look at you as the attackers, so it creates a different issue. And these kinds of solutions, there needs to be diplomacy where people can work with the police and with the military and with all levels of government and try and track down terror cells. Because, if the military launches airstrikes, they may hit a target, they may kill a couple terrorists, but they may also hit a civilian target, which can create a huge issue, in this kind of war. And so the non-conventional nature gives Hamas the advantage and makes it harder to knock out Hamas, even with a good army, because they're always going to have some sort of support. But, the Israeli army has the much better equipment and much better weaponry. And the unfortunate truth is, a lot of the terrorists and people realize we can't win against the Israeli army. They've done it in the 7 Days War. They've basically seen history. And so they go out there and they hide among civilians on purpose. And they purposely launch non-conventional attacks. They'll get somebody who's impaired to detonate themselves or put something on them without them even knowing and detonate it. And they tend to use dirtier tactics. And so that's where there needs to be a special task force. And now Ariel Sharon had a good approach for one thing because he would target people who were registered and ready to be a suicide bomber. And he would target militants and he would take out the car. And he would make it real clear we're not going to put up with this. And that was a good approach because he was really trying to prevent these kinds of things from happening. And a lot of times with terrorism and a lot of these issues, it's wired into the population. And regardless, people support them. A lot of these people without even knowing it because they'll truly think these guys are protecting them. And Hamas uses the social agenda that we want to improve services for you as a way to get elected. And then they start this whole diatribe. And so, you see a lot of these terror cells that basically use the people for support and they brainwash them. And Hamas has a huge advantage here because they have so many young people that they can brainwash and do stuff for them. So this is really a tougher situation because, if the United States had Mexico launching terror attacks, it would be very difficult to stop it because there'd be always people coming in through the borders and people always finding a way to get through. And, same thing with Canada. It's a neighbor country, and so, like with the Gaza bombings, that was a little over because they were attacking civilian targets and they went too far. because they didn't hit the Hamas headquarters, but at the same time, Hamas launches a lot of attacks too. And they kind of encouraged that behavior. And they kind of wanted the bombing because they wanted something they could use against Israel. When they see a lot of that new propaganda, they use it to say, look what Israel did to you. And so basically, this is not a situation that can basically just solve itself. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to be very difficult for there to be a peace, because there's going to be a lot of hate on both sides, and there's going to be a lot of attitudes, and hopefully in time it'll change. But that's my review. Thanks for watching.